உள்ளதலதுள்ள உணர் உள்ளதூ உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளல் அற உள்ளத்தே உள்ளதான் உள்ளம் எனும் உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளலெவன் உள்ளத்தே உள்ளபடி உள்ளதே உள்ளல் உணர்வாயே. Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on the teachings in Ulladu Narpadu. To bring it to context, we are in verse number 14. We have just covered the 4 verses which dealt with the duality of knowledge and ignorance, verses 9, 10, 11 and 12. There will be this tinge, you can call any of the verses as discussion of knowledge and ignorance, but these 4 have directly dealt with them. First, with the duality of knowledge and ignorance in the objective space, then how the entire knowledge and ignorance in the objective space is dependent on the first person, the ego. Then in the 3rd verse, how the nature of that knowledge is, how it is bereft of the duality, and at the same time it is not void, it is fullness, was discussed in the 3rd verse. And in the 4th verse again, jnanamam tane mei nanavam jnanam abjnanama. Jnana, the self alone, is real. The multiplicity of knowing is unreal. Nanavam jnanam abjnanama is ignorance. Poyam ajnanamume, as it is ignorance and it is unreal. Jnanamam tanne andri endru. How much ever multiplicity may be there, if you ask for whom is this multiplicity, there is always the self. It is for me. Who am I? Takes the attention away from the multiplicity, the falsity, back to the source. And the analogy is that of Anigal Tampalavum Poi Meyam Ponnai Andri Undo Pugal. How the variety of ornaments, their names and forms, cannot remain apart from jnanam, apart from gold. Similarly, the nanavam jnanam of names and forms cannot exist apart from the reality of the self. So hold the self and absorb the multiplicity into that, was how the set of 4 verses ended. We are now embarking on the 14th verse. Tanmai undel munnilai padarkaigal தாமுளவாம் தன்மையின் உண்மையை தானாய்ந்து தன்மையரின் முன்னிலை படர்க்கை முடிவுற்று ஒன்றாய் ஒளிரும் தன்மையே தன்னிலைமை தான். தன்மை உண்டேல் முன்னிலை படர்க்கைகள் தாமுளவாம் தன்மையின் உண்மையை தானாய்ந்து தன்மையரின் முன்னிலை படர்க்கை மூடி ஒற்றொன்றாய் ஒளிரும் தன்மையே தன்னிலைமைதான். Tanmai is first person, Munnilai is second person, and Padarkai is third person. I, we is Tanmai. You, yourselves is Munnilai. They, it, themselves, all this form the Padarkai, the first person, second person and third person. And this is not a grammar lesson. So we have to go into the inner meaning of what Bhagavan means by first person. So even before we go into gathering the meaning of the verse, let us look at from whatever we have gone through in our earlier discussions, what is this Tanmay? What is this first person? What is this first person? We have seen that from the discussions we had about Tom Cheese finding about how the earth is what displaces 7% of our body every day, and in about 14 days time about 90-95% of the body is changed, and in about a year's time practically every atom is new, is different from what it was before. So obviously we could decide that the contents of the body is not even dependent upon to call this I. And for that we had the illustration of the boat of Theseus, for which the Westerners do not have an answer, but Indian Vedanta has an answer, that is in terms of practice, not as a theoretical answer, but in terms of practice it does have. So let us go back to that story of Theseus' boat for a moment, and we can easily know that there are similar stories about the sword in Zen and even in other cultures, about broom and broom handle, about anything made of component parts we can have. Whether the inquiry is what is the Tanmay, what is the first person? How does someone rise and say, this is what I am, Tanmay? Or how does the who am I arise? By identification with something. The boat of Theseus is the interesting story which you can expand and apply to anything. This story is attributed to 2000 years ago philosophers of that time, Pericles and others. But subsequently the same has been worked on by philosophers like Hobbes and all, just 100-200 years ago. So it's a continuing story for which the answer of Western philosophers is, we really don't know. Who I am, we really don't know. It is something that we cannot know. But let's go into the story. The story is that there was this. The story itself is attributed to Pericles, that is about 2000 years ago, and he tells a story that is about another 1000 years before him. About 1000 years before the narrative from Pericles, there is this demon or a creature which is causing lots of fear to the Greek citizens, and there is this hero Theseus who is supposed to have embarked on a journey through the ocean to that island where it resides, and he is supposed to have done samhara, has killed that. And just like we celebrate in our culture the samhara of various demonic things by the good forces, that particular event of the killing of that demon is celebrated in Greece for about 1000 years when it is narrated, the story is narrated. And that boat of Theseus is in the harbor, of whatever place Pericles is. And his inquiry is, see, this boat is made of so many planks of wood. The wood, each of those planks, let us for convenience say there are about 200 planks. Over 1000 years, each of those planks have become rotten and they have been replaced by some other planks. Now the question to the philosophers is, now that the boat is completely made of all new planks, can it still be called the boat of Theseus? The Hobbesian introduction to that is, Suppose somebody collects all the rotten plants and in their backyard they rebuild that ship. Is that ship a better ship of Theseus than the ship that is in the harbor? Then some people say, since Theseus is no more there as the captain, it cannot be called, it can be called. So I asked this question of my mother. As usual, downstairs, we had discussed about Tom Chi's scientific findings that her body, 7% of it is being exchanged with the earth every day. And I asked her, it is like the planks in the ship of Theseus. Are you the contents? Are you that contents of the? For a moment she said yes. Then we both did vichara and she inquired and find out that obviously something beyond the contents and quite not bothered about what the contents is. He's saying this is me. Though the contents are changing, it is saying this is me. And we can apply that same thing to the prana, to the emotions, to the mind, to the intellect, and the gathering of it goes directly to the source of the jiva without the jivatva. It calls the jiva to be birthless, deathless, not terrible, not to be touched by water, fire, etc. So it goes to the root of the jiva, whereas the other Upanishad, it refers to the two birds. Two birds on the tree, one enjoying the self-attention, living in the contentment that it is Purna Vastu, and the other bird eating the fruits of the tree because it has held on to a few contents as this is me, and since those contents are limited, by adding something either for upkeep of the contents or from taste purposes, it feels that the deficiency is temporarily allayed, but then again the deficiency comes and there is this suffering of pain and pleasure alternatively, and whenever it eats of the fruit of pain, it looks up to that bird, the Atman, which is reveling in its own glory. Somewhat like that goes that verse. So let us dwell on that for a moment, at least for investigation purposes, that the jiva seems to be that consciousness which feels it can exist only by holding on to some contents, either contents of the body, contents of breath, contents of emotions, thoughts, or the intellectual good and bad, cause and effect. Only by holding on to these, I survive. And as a corollary, it has this fear of death, that when those contents are absent, I myself am absent. If you permit me, let me recall the incident of enlightenment of Bhagavan, which function is going to come shortly, that is in the middle of July, where in that room in Madurai, near the south tower of the temple, Meenakshi Amman temple, Bhagavan was in the first floor room. That room alone they have not changed, they have kept it as it is, of his uncle's house. In that room, he who had that purity, that non-attachment to his contents, that he could feel the Sarvavyapi Arunachala all the time in his heart. Arivaru Siruvaya Dadumudal Aruna Chalamiha Peridana Arivinilanga, he said. Who is Bhagavan? Who was seen as that light by that blind midwife? For him, Arivaru Siruvaya Adumudal Aruna, even before other thoughts could come to his consciousness, he had this Purana of Arunachala, the Ajapa Japa of Arunachala going on in his heart. his non-attachment to the world and body was of such nature that the Sarvavyapi was in touch with him. He was in touch with the Sarvavyapi Arunachala. And to such a one on that day, in his 16.5 years old, of that bodily timing, he gets this fear of death. So what can die at that time? It is the transcending of even the name of God, that he says that there was this fear of death. And obviously he had no thought to consult anybody in the sensory world, which he must have already transcended, because Arunachala was going on in him. I didn't have any inclination to consult anybody. I decided this has to be found out by myself, he says. And what all does he still? He stills the body immediately. Obviously, the contents of the body is not me. Obviously, the breath which is changing, which is drawing from outside and giving to the outside is not me. Let me still it. So he says he stilled the body and deeply drew the breath and stilled it. And to that pure one, the moment he stilled the breath, all thoughts stilled, he says. Not even the I thought arose. All thoughts were stilled and not even the I thought arose. Tanmayatru. The first person was no more there. And his inquiry was, now that the first person has vanished, as the grasping of the contents of the body, breath and mind is no more grasping, am I not there, he asks. Have I vanished? No. The Spurana inside, the consciousness, the Purna Vastu rises and shines as I. Says, I am the deathless spirit. I am not any of these contents. I am that deathless spirit. And from that moment, even when these contents were playing their part, as part of the worlds where contents have a place, his identity with the source, his identity with the deathless spirit never went away. It was always present as a Shruti note would be present in a musical play. He says, in a music, in a song, how the Shruti note would go on as the substrate. Similarly, in him, I am the deathless spirit. I am that I am. I was going on without break. That is what he says. Now, now that we have some idea about the first person, for technical purposes, the Upanishad says the Jiva or the first person is the one still clinging on to some of the contents, the sensory bodily contents or the breath. I have such a perfect yogic body that my breath kosha takes care of my sensory body, that health always prevails. That is identification with breath, let us say for the moment. The contents of the consciousness, the mind, I am so and so, I am so knowledgeable, I am not knowledgeable, I am such a dharmi. When we identify with, see how in my case I was sharing in ground floor with my mother. Suppose I develop this thought that I am such a dharmi, that both my mother and mother-in-law are there, I am able to take care of them, then that grasping will make me look at others also from those contents only and play in that world of whether how many are able to do that, quite forgetting that Ishvara is the source who allows the breath or any such activity to go on. I would take credit and I would eat of the fruits of that. And when that fruit is sour and or when that fruit is bitter, when I am not able to do that dharma, I have to go away and somebody else has to take care. And if I am a truthful inquirer, what happened to my dharma then? The bitter fruit is held. Oh, these 2 days somebody else had to come and take care. So how can I call myself a dharmi? So those all are dropped when one inquires into Tanmayin Unmai. So let us see the first two lines in this 14th verse. Tanmai undel munnilai padarkaigal tamulavam. Whenever the identity of the jiva is now holding on to the contents, immediately it will see others also, the one to whom it is addressing, also only as similar contents. Also the third persons and the ahrine, the neutral, the worldly objects. See, the worldly objects also have a form, don't they? So they have also been aggregated by some force. Now we need not divide between life and non-life. Anything that has form has that gripping or that jiva bhava. Tanmayin unmayai taanaayந்து. So, tanmai undel munnilai padarkaigal taamulavam. So far as I am identified with the body, as I said, even if I am identified with the thoughts that I am a dharmi, then I start looking at the person I am facing or the rest of the world in terms of that. Munnilai padarkaigal taamulavam. Tanmayin unmayai taanaayந்து. I have to inquire into what is the truth of this I, this grasping I. In Buddhism it is said that the ego, the first person, clings on to the senses, clings on to the false beliefs, clings on to the rituals, and clings on to the ego itself. All these clingings are there, but Bhagavan brings another element. The ego is not merely clinging. The ego is also created out of aversion. Not only out of clinging, but also out of aversion. Bhagavan says, both clinging and aversion have to be let go of. That some of the memories that we have about the experiences we have had, we are averse to that. We don't want to identify with that. We don't want to say that that is me. But that is what is me. That the moment the clinging and aversion are there, that sum total is the jiva bhava. Therefore, I necessarily look at the second person and third persons or the objects in creation only in terms of the contents. But now that we have inquired into it, I may look at them in terms of the ability to grasp and ability to let go. Because I see that the contents are changing. So my inquiry has shifted from believing that they are merely the contents to thinking that who is mother? Mother is someone who remembers an incident where she lost something 50 years ago in Kerala. So that is mother is what I would think if I am identified with some of my own thoughts. Tanmai undel munnilai padarkaigal taamulavam. Tanmayin unmayai taanaayந்து. When I inquire and drop the contents of breath, the mind, the thought, and now that we know that the jiva is something that is grasping. Jiva is that ability to grasp something or to be averse to something. The interesting thought here that we can bring is that in Ramanacentre, it is said, Pindam meviya nadane, Brahmandam meviya nadanai. That it is the same ability to hold on or aggregate certain contents and call it I. Similar is the ability of Ishwaratva, which gathers the whole creation and identifies with it and calls that as I. So before we go into the main part of this verse, let us see a discussion between Bhagavan and Paul Brunton. The discussion is about the word God, that yeah. Let me read that so that we get an idea of this important concept. It is in talk number 112. How the grasping of the contents is the Jiva Bhava, and Bhagavan is going to show us that similar nature, if it is there with Samashti, then that is called as Ishvara. But let me read Bhagavan's words only. Mr. Paul Brunton, while reading Upadesha Manjari, came across the statement that the ego, the world, and God are all unreal. He desired to use a different word for God, or at least a qualifying adjective. Let us at least use, example, the creative force or personal God. Why don't we change that in Upadesha Manjari and say that when you inquire into the truth of the first person, even the truth of God will come and merge into the singular truth. Why should we remove God from the dictionary is what Brunton is asking. And Bhagavan says, Bhagavan explained, Sri Bhagavan explained that God means Samashti, that is all that is plus being. In the same way as I, the individuality means individual plus being, and the world means variety plus being. Being is in all cases real. Satsvabhavato vastu kevalam. Isha jivayor veshadhibida satsvabhavato vastu kevalam. Being is in all cases real. The satsvabhava is real in the case of the individual, the world, and God. The all in the case of God, the variety in the case of world, plus the being. The being in all cases is real. The all, the variety, and the individual is in each case the unreal. Even if you aggregate everything and identify and say this is I, then the contents and the ability to grasp is unreal. So also in the union of the real and the unreal, the mixing up or the false identification is wrong. It amounts to saying Sat Asat Vilakshana, that is transcending the real and the unreal, Sat and Asat. Reality is that which transcends all concepts, including that of God. So, Tanmai Undel Munnilai Padarkaigal Tamulavam. The moment I identify with some contents and say this is me, the person to whom I am addressing is also similar contents. God also is all contents plus being. So now Padarkai, we can make it as one. That all the Padarkais together, let us call it as the Samashti, which will include us also as the part. And the one that is grisping, the Brahmandam Meviyanathan is God. But what will happen? Tanmayan Unmayai Tana in the Tanmayarin. If one inquires into, as Bhagavan did in those few moments, when somebody asks him, how much time did you take to realize the self? Bhagavan for a moment says it might have gone for 20 minutes or so or something like that. Then he says, what? Where is time there? How can you say it happened in so much time? We were seeing this morning that a later verse in Ulladu Narpadu was connected with Bhagavan's teaching of Ajata. The moment one reaches the Ajata, let us say that the journey is from Srishti Drishti to Drishti Srishti and then Ajata. that is the journey for the jiva, takes the world to be far greater and itself to be far smaller, and the enquiry is done, that is Srishti Drishtivada, where Bhagavan says one necessarily have to posit God and surrender to that power which is running everything. From there, with Bhagavan's grace and the Upadesha of the Guru, let us say one comes to Pratibhasika Satya, that no, can there be the world without the rising of consciousness? There cannot be. So therefore, all this is a dream-like content projected by me. Therefore, who am I? Is the right enquiry. This enquiry takes one to Ajata, says Bhagavan, that the self alone is, there is no creation, nobody bound, no liberation, no bondage, nobody seeking liberation. The self alone is, and that is the state where Bhagavan says that, and Sivaprakasham Pillaival in his commentary to Ulladu Narpadu writes, since the self is one there is no feeling that at one time I was bound, at one time I had Srishti Drishtivada, at one time I changed it to Drishti Srishti, and now I am abiding in the self. No. All the earlier situations are completely absorbed in the unborn self, says Bhagavan. Similarly, here in the current verse, Tanmayin Unmayai Tanayinde, the moment the inquiry into the truth of one's own identity is taken and one drops the contents as well as the need to grasp. What does Bhagavan do? When the contents arise in the form of a thought, the ego, the I thought, because of past habits, may want to run after that thought, or they want to avoid it at all costs. Why did this thought come? I don't want to be such a person. But Bhagavan says, eschew both. Both clinging and aversion are to be eschewed, and one should diligently inquire, for whom is this thought? Have you gone somewhere? When even some people come to very difficult problems, the problem is one of children getting on into a particular mode and not showing progress, life not moving, getting stuck in some place for many years together. That is, they have drawn a blank. The future of that particular problem is not known to them. That is where Atma-vichara can come. That is where faith comes. Even when the future to us looks completely blank, that is where faith in God and Atma-vichara is putting light on oneself. For whom is this unsolvable problem? It is for me. Who am I? Bring the light of self-attention there. Anyway, that is all blank. And Bhagavan says, those who are seeking God in dhyana and vichara, they come to that point. They come to that point where the samashti is seen as blank, where the samashti is seen as worthless. The names and forms are all crossed. And many of them, they have some difficulty in crossing that. And one incident where Chadwick asks Bhagavan, I get fear when I come to this point that whatever I am facing is a blank. So, not only is the impossible problem a blank, even the possible solutions we have had and have been temporarily holding are only that. And that is why Bhagavan says, even something very nice appears to you as thought, don't cling to it. Or don't be averse of a difficult problem, but ask diligently, for whom is this thought? Therefore, even when everything becomes blank, continue the inquiry into Tanmay and Nonmay. Who am I? Who is facing the blank? So whenever somebody is in trouble for many years, the problem is not solving, we have to encourage that person who is feeling like that are you not there? Because Bhagavan says, when the entire creation becomes blank, also to the dhyani, he says, are you not there? You are there. So hold that I, Tanmayan Unmayai Tanaite, Tanmayarin. Then the relative self vanishes. the I and its contents both drop away. The problem is dismantled and thrown away. The self-awareness or self-attention is alone the truth. The self-luminous self alone is the truth. Everything is dismantled. Whatever the problem may be, whatever the situation may be, one just holds the light from within and one exists by that light alone. The problem or that entire blank is not touching the self-luminous self. Only it touches the ego, the one who identifies with some contents and feels that all the other contents are coming and challenging me. The society is against me. The world is against me. All these are only when one identifies with some limiting adjuncts. When one inquires into Tanmayin Unmayai Tanainde, Tanmayaril, Munnilai Padarkai, Mudivutru. Immediately, who is the mother? Who is the attendant? Who is the contents in this world? Who are all listening to this? When Tanmayan Unmayai Tanainde, Tanmayarin. When the ego and its contents vanish into the self-luminous self, then Munnilai, the ones to whom there was some addressing, and the Padarkai, the others or the Samashti put together, is all only the self-luminous self. Mudivutru. So that the mother is some contents of the body. Oh, she does pranayama. Though she is in the bed for last 10 years, she does hard pranayama, and with that she has maintained. All these concepts is not her. Munnilai Padarkai Mudivutru. Who is that? That is not a journeying jiva. It is that bird which is on top branch, which is self-reveling in nature. It is self-joyous, self-contented, self-luminous, self-correcting. So, that is the nature of the Tanmay, the first person, when the ego, the limited, and all its contents, its mine and not mine, vanish. Along with that, Munnilai Padarkai, with the discussion with Brunton, even the concept that the entire creation is now held together by the Ishvara Shakti, that is also dropped, and all the three, the individual, the world, and God, are all now in Satsvabhava. Satsvabhavato Vastu Kevalam, Veshahanataha Swatma Darshanam. When you drop the contents, you have Darshana of the Atma. Isha Darshanam Swatma Rupataha. The Ishvara's Darshana itself is had as the same self, as the same Satsvabhava, not as two different Sats. Isha Darshanam Swatma Rupataha. Atma Samstitihi Swatma Darshanam. To abide in the self as the self is to see the self. Atma Nirdvaya. There are no two selves. Atma Nishtata. Tanmayin Unmayai Tanainde Tanmayarin. Munnilai Padarkai Mudivutru. Ondrai Olirum Tanmaye Tannilaimai Tan. Let us put the verse together. The verse has these three contents for us. The first one is Tanmai Undel Munnilai Padarkaigal Tamulavam. The moment I identify with contents or even with the ability to grasp or the ability to be ours of, then I see others also either as their contents or as their ability to grasp and let go or be ours of. Not let go, let me not use that word. The word to be used there is like and aversion. The aversion also is part of Jiva Bhava. So, Tanmai Undel, Munnilai Padarkaigal, Tamulavam. The moment the first person arises, the second and third persons also arise and exist. Tanmayin Unmayai Tanain the Tanmayarin. When you inquire into the truth of yourself by self-inquiry and completely extinguish this need to grasp some contents and you see your own Satsvabhava, then what happens? For such a one, For such a one who is now abiding in the self alone is, can there be the munnilai and padarkai? முன்னிலை படற்கைகள் முடிவுற்று ஒன்றாய் ஒளிரும் தன்மையே தன்னிலைமை தான். So the third idea that Bhagavan gives is that the moment the ego, its contents and whatever it is related to are extinguished in the self-enquiry, then there is no second person, there is no third person, there is no person who is now going to identify with the entire creation and say that that is Ishvara. All the three, the individual, the world, suppose I am addressing the world at large, I am talking to the world at large, let us keep that as second person. I cannot address Ishvara or the ability to aggregate or be awares of some content is completely eliminated and all the three shine as one. Mudivutru ஒன்றாய் ஒளிரும் தன்மையே, as the self alone, the self luminous self alone, being Satsvabhava, that alone is my nature. Now that my nature, there is no the my who has started the journey. The aham also merges in the ajata. So the ajata, the self which is beyond birth and death, which is beyond existence and non-existence, that alone is having consumed, having absorbed all the three of individual, world and God, and shines self-luminously. That is the indication given in the verse, entirely to be experienced by sadhana with the abundant grace of Bhagavan. Because so far as we have identified with a body, so far as we are in the Srishti Drishti Vada, Bhagavan says that definitely God has to be posited. So far as you feel something other than you is there independent of the light of consciousness within you, that is how you relate. Don't leave God, don't leave Bhagavan, don't leave Arunachala, hold on, do the bhakti. Along with bhakti, do Atma Uchara. If we are completely understanding Bhagavan's Pratibhasika Satya, then we come to Atma Uchara alone. That alone is enough, because whatever is projected by the consciousness from within. For whom is this? That is enough. When that the truth of the first person is understood, then that Pratibhasika Satya is also absorbed into the Ajata, which Bhagavan says to his intimate chelas that this is my experience. This is the truth that I am experiencing. That self alone is, there is no first person, second person or third person, says Bhagavan with his immense grace. Now that we are addressing in the subject-object relationship, with his immense grace, let us sit in practice of Atma Ucharam till 8 o'clock, where Akka will give the summary of this verse. Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana, sir. Namo Ramana. Very, very, Bhagwan's grace. It's a very moving verse and very difficult to say anything further about it. I thought the best further comment on it would be to ask Nanda Kumarji to have 10 more minutes of self-inquiry itself. That would be the best way to do further manana on it. I think there was a paucity of time today for the self-inquiry also. No, only one thought came to me. I will just share for a couple of minutes and then maybe we'll sit for another 10 minutes, sir. What do you say? Sir, you're on mute.
Yeah, you can share your experiences with the devotees. That has always been greatly helpful.
No, actually, it is everything was said about it, about the verse today. It was very comprehensive, and it was very not only comprehensive, it was very touching also. Bhagwan's answer to Brunton. See, this concern which everyone has. Everyone has a concern about losing the world, and that need to grasp the need of the ego to grasp something which will come again. Bhagavan will dwell on it later. Urupatri Undam. That is, Nanda Kumarji has given us a sort of a precursor to that by telling us how the ego wants to grasp something or the other. And that is very beautiful that Bhagavan says, why don't you grasp that being itself, which is the basis of all the things. There were two experiences which we had during this workshop. We recently had last weekend a workshop, and one was of a devotee saying that I am not able to reconcile with the fact that world is only in my mind. I am not able to reconcile with it, he said. So the point is that, okay, but one thing I could say was, there are two answers to that. One I said was that it's all right, you don't feel the world when you sleep. The world may or may not exist, but you reconcile to the fact that for you, so far as you are concerned, the world does not exist when you do not exist. When you are not there in deep sleep, there is no world for you. That much you are aware of. So why do you worry about whether the world exists or not independently? When I am sleeping, the world is still there. Of course, Bhagavan says that world didn't come and tell you that it is existing. In your sleep, did it come and tell you, I am existing even when you are asleep? It's only when you wake up that you surmise that the world was there. So we can easily understand that so far as we are concerned, the world is dependent on our awareness of the world, the existence of the world, the existence of thought. It's all dependent on our own awareness of it. So that's why Bhagavan says it's all tanmayundel. Only when the first person exists, everything else can come into existence. But there is a fact that when I say I am not able to reconcile to something, I am able to reconcile to something, in all this, we do not inquire into who that I is. So, tanmayin unmayai aarayin. Bhagavan says you inquire into the truth of this I. What is this I? In every thought, in every second person, third person experience, there is the sense of I-ness, which is going unnoticed completely. Nobody sees who is this I. Nobody wonders who is this I. We do not try to even experience the I-ness in each and every thought of ours, in each and every experience of ours. We are so concerned with the experience that we do not pause to ask, who is saying I? I like this, I don't like this, I am able to accept, I am not able to accept. Who actually is saying this? This question we do not face, and we do not even try to grasp that I. When we try to grasp that I, Bhagavan is telling us that the second and third person will automatically drop off, of course, because the attention is totally on the first person. And finally, the first person also will be known to be non-existent. That's why Tanmay Arin, the I thought will also disappear, and the non-dual truth alone will shine forth. The other thoughts that we examined during the workshop was, so supposing we say that we have a very subtle identity, is that all right to have? Supposing I feel that I am this sky, it does not seem to have a form, but is that an embodied existence? Is there a second and third person over there? Is there duality over there? And everyone agreed that yes, there is duality. Even if I think I am the universe, even if I think I am one part of the vast part of the universe, like the sky, which appears to be formless, there is still identity. And that's why this question came up when Paul Brenton said, what about God? God is all, says Bhagavan. To have all, there must be one. Without one, there cannot be two or many or all. So that one brings about duality. Question that one, says Bhagavan. If we question that one, then is that one, meaning the first person, is that first person real? This is the question Bhagavan asks us to put to ourselves. Or he asks us to turn back and try to see who this first person is. Try to experience, because it cannot be unknown to us. But for the tendency of the I to try and grasp something, the I cannot remain unknown to us. So the I appears to be hidden behind our multiple experiences. The I appears to be hidden. And once we search for it, Bhagavan says, Naiva Manasam, there is no I, because what happens when the first person disappears, the second and third persons disappear. When the second and third persons disappear also, the first person has to disappear. That's why Bhagavan says, when we cut off thoughts through inquiry, then the I thought has to also fall back. It has to dissolve, because it is dependent on, a thinker is dependent on the existence of thoughts. Thinker is a relative existence. So every experience of ours we see only in relation to objects. But what is this subject by itself? This is the beautiful inquiry to which Bhagavan is taking us. The core of our being, the core of our existence, instead of living continuously and pathetically dependent on some object or the other, gross or subtle, we would be then free, absolutely free in our own true nature. This is what Bhagavan's infinite grace is promising and revealing to us. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaka.
Namo
Ramana to all.
Ramananjali, Ramananjali, Ramananjali.